Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We have joining us today Dr. Margot Hurlbert, who is the Canada Research Chair in Climate Change, Energy, and Sustainability Policy at the University of Regina. And we also have with us Helena Semedo, who is Deputy Director General at the Food and Agriculture Organization. Thanks so much to both of you for being with us today.
Thank you and good morning.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And our conversation today is one I'm really excited about because this is so topical, the intersection of these two things we're going to talk about today, food systems and climate change. It's really the year for both of these things, at least when it comes to these international moments that we're focusing on. We have this week, finally, the Food Systems Summit happening Thursday. And then obviously later this year, we have COP. And so, the conversations that we're having around both of these two things and their intersection, I think really are of the moment and are going to determine how progress is made on food systems and how progress is made on climate change. I think we have seen that you can't have one without the other. And so I'm really excited to dig into this conversation today. And Helena, I wanted to start with you and talk a little bit about how your perspective of how food systems reform can provide an opportunity to take necessary actions on climate and vice versa.
Okay, again, thank you for inviting me to join this conversation. As you refer, we have a big challenge ahead. We need to feed by 2050 a growing population. We have to provide food, fiber, feed, and fuel. But at the same time, we need to go to a decarbonization of our economy. This meaning that when we think about how to feed the population, we need to produce more food. And the food is not only the production, it's the transformation, it's the consumption, and how we can make this sustainable, that we protect our environment. And if you look at the figures, the agri-food systems, they contribute to around more than 30% of the greenhouse emission. And the challenge ahead is how to feed the population, how to produce and to consume in a sustainable way that we reduce the effects to climate change. And this is how we are going to mix the two agendas. And what we think that we need to have a positive narrative that the food system, they are broken. Our food system, they contribute to the increase of greenhouse gas emission. We need to go to a zero low carbon emission by 2050. What are the solutions? And I think we need to be solutions oriented. How we can produce more sustainable, how we can be in consumption that we consume healthy food, but the food are not increasing the emission, and how we can reduce food losses and waste, particularly food waste. Because if you see, the food we are wasting is the resources we are wasting. We waste the land, we waste the water, we contribute to greenhouse gas emission, and we are not consuming that food. And this is how we really see the linkage with the two agenda as you asked. And I think, as you mentioned, the Food System Summit and the COP26, which are not yet linked, they need to be connected, they need to be seen in synergy, how one can feed the other and vice versa.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think, thinking about this as an opportunity. And I really like that point you made, Helena, about food waste. That's something sort of a personal interest, sounds a strange way of putting it, but personal passion, perhaps I'll say, of mine is avoiding food waste. And I really think it's something that we all need to be thinking about more. And people don't necessarily think about it in the way that you framed it as that's lost resources. We have spent all of the energy throughout the entire supply chain to produce this food that's not being eaten. And, it's also really stark when we think about the fact that the world actually does produce enough food to feed everyone that currently lives on Earth. Yet we still have increasing hunger numbers, and that's something that's really disturbing. Margot, I'll come to you next. Tell me a little bit about your perspective on how we can see this linkage between food systems and climate as an opportunity.
Thank you for that, and thank you for having me here. I wholeheartedly agree with what Maria has said about the food system, and I think our challenge is the earth, the land system, the agricultural lands where we're producing our food could be sinks for carbon dioxide, and right now they are sources. So we really need to consider the potential of land to achieve that sink status. So the IPCC Land and Climate Report that came out in 2019 was taking on that task, trying to envision and show the science for how to make land a sink, so that when we're producing food in rice paddies or on dry lands, semi-arid dry lands, we're actually storing carbon dioxide in the land. So I think considering new ways of agriculture that retain carbon dioxide in the soil and don't produce more carbon dioxide in the way that we're farming and producing our food are really key for thinking about climate change. And in the Western world, here where food waste is so prevalent, I think that there's an opportunity to consider agriculture. We've been so focused on our power production and our energy and getting net zero by 2050 up in the United States and Canada and UK, that we have an opportunity to do the science and to link the science on how we can make our food system more resilient, but also acting and taking its place in acting as a sink for the carbon dioxide. And I want to thank you for having this, because I think there's such an opportunity when we think of the whole food system in the context of climate change to consider two things. And one is risk, because with El Nino and La Nina, when we look at the climate science, we've got such risk for multi-breadbasket failures when we have droughts in South America, North America, or in Africa and Europe, that we need to start considering those impacts and risks of climate change. But thinking of food systems and climate change also gives us the opportunity to consider justice in our global food systems, where we've got undernourished people that require more calories. And then here in Canada and the United States, we've got people that have too many calories, the food waste, as you're saying.
Yeah, thanks so much, Margot. The point that you just made about the energy industry isn't one that I've really thought about before, but you're so right that we've been talking, for decades now about how we need to be reducing, reliance on coal and oil and all of that, and really moving the way that we get energy and power to a more sustainable way. But the agriculture conversation hasn't been front and center in that way, even though it is such a tremendous producer of greenhouse gases. It is such a drain on the Earth's resources, water, land, air, all of that, of course. And the point you made about South America and the effects of climate change in, the North American region as well, Central America, reminds me of an interview that I recently did with the head of the Inter-American Development Bank's private sector arm, IDB Invest, and he was talking about how important it is, because Latin America is the breadbasket of the world, for them to focus their efforts on improving agricultural supply chains in the region and making them more sustainable. And he was really saying that if Latin America can do it, the rest of the world can look to Latin America as an example, and then Latin America also can use that its market power essentially in all of the food that it already produces for the world and helping shift this. So those are really great points. Maria Helena, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about what FAO specifically is doing on this issue. And as you approach your work, how do you keep this link between climate and food systems front and center when you are doing your work?
Yes, what we are doing in FAO, as I refer and as Margot also said, we are in a moment that we see that one of the drivers of hunger and food insecurity is climate change, among others. And the climate change is bringing some climate events. They become more frequent and they become more intense. Then what we need to be resilient. What we need is to have resilient, sustainable, and inclusive agri-food system, because we have a problem of inclusiveness. If you see, we have around the world now in 2021, around 800 million people food insecure, and this has been exacerbated by COVID-19. What we try to do is to see how we can protect our supply chain, how we can have food systems that are more inclusive and more sustainable. And this takes me back to what I refer, not only on the land solution, as Dr. Margot said, how we can have solutions that can be sustainable, that can be green, can be resilient, and can also be a carbon sink. But linked to the production, we need to look at the transformation and the consumption. How are our consumption patterns? How we can have a consumption where we have healthy diets, but they are also low carbon diets, because this is also important when we look at it. And this is what FAO does. We look at it in a systemic way. We don't look in silos. That's why the Sustainable Development Agenda and the climate agenda, they are very much linked in our work, and FAO has been one of the leaders in the Food System Summit, exactly to have this agro-food system approach, not in the production, but throughout the value chain. And we looked particularly at the smallholder farmers, because they are the most affected. They are the ones maybe not as protected as where we think at the big producers, and how we can help them to adapt to climate change. And here innovation is important. How we can bring innovative approach, and COVID-19 show us that we need to be innovative, that we have green and sustainable solutions. And this is how we are approaching, how we are coming with nutrition solutions. I think nutrition has been very high in FAO agenda. And the nutrition is not to say, don't eat this, but what is the content of having a healthy life, a healthy diet. And if you look at the FAO new strategic framework, we have 4 main blocks: better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life. With better life is not only linked to the livelihoods, is to live in the green cities, is to live in a sustainable environment, that we can also have a healthy and sustainable life. And this is what FAO is really doing. But we have also to think, where we talk about the 2 agenda, that they have synergies, but you have trade-offs. And sometimes you need to make choice. It's not that everything goes very nicely, no? But we need to make choice. And those are the trade-offs, and what FAO support the countries to make the big choice. And the high choice, not the big, but the high choice, I should say.
And I think that is the difficult point, right? Where it's not like we don't know what we need to do. Everyone knows what we need to do. The science exists, the technology exists, the innovation is happening, but we're still not doing it. And that applies to, the food systems piece, but also obviously the climate challenge as a whole. And, that is one of these big challenges. And Margot, I did want to ask you a little bit more about challenges. What is the challenge of linking this food systems piece to climate in this way, when climate has really become, particularly here in the US, a political topic, and it's become very contentious. And we have been talking about the need for change for decades, and nothing is happening. Is that actually dangerous to be linking, food systems transformation to, a climate movement that sort of has stalled over the decades?
Thanks for that, Teresa. I think that's really an interesting and important question, the politicization, because in my perspective, in the Western world here, it's almost politicization that has prevented agriculture from addressing climate change, because the agricultural producers have very little power in the price that they receive for selling their produce. So they have a political argument of assistance and not taking on transformational change that might increase their costs of production, because they have so little control over their sale price. So the politicization here in Canada, especially, of not increasing costs to agricultural producers has exempted them from carbon pricing in many states and provinces here. So the politicization, I think the social scientists have to get engaged here and think about how these issues get addressed, and politics is sadly going to enter into it, and maybe is part of the reason we're here where we are today, is because of that. So I think not avoiding it, but addressing it head on is necessary. And we've taken on the energy systems with Fridays for the Future, demanding more renewable energy, wind and solar, that we need something similar to nudge decision making on my table and in my landscape, so that I, here in the urban areas, am living in a sustainable, transformative way where I'm not emitting. I have more green space so that my heat's reducing. I'm producing more food in the urban centers in a sustainable way, and decision making at the farm gate. So right now it's all about economics for our agricultural producers, as opposed to even considering the impact on CO2s and greenhouse gases. So that whole supply chain consideration of the food system and policy and international trade, and what it could look like if we're going to have a fair, just, and climate resilient transformational food system into the future. So I'm really concerned right now. The prices of fertilizer and ammonia are increasing due to record high gas prices. And I'm concerned, how is this going to ricochet through our food systems and ultimately impact vulnerable people around the world who can't live through another price escalation in food. So, real problems that are happening right now in the food system, that summits like these that you've mentioned, the Food Summit and COP, they're just so well situate to start addressing some of these issues.
Yeah, thanks so much for bringing in the agricultural subsidy piece. FAO actually just last week put out a new report and found that 87% of current agricultural subsidies around the world are actually harmful. If you look at what they do to market distortions and how they encourage people to grow, more traditional, perhaps staple starch crops instead of fruits and vegetables, more nutritious food, the pesticides that you mentioned, and sort of incentivizing all of these practices that actually are quite harmful for the food system and, not helping as well. But the report also mentions moving away from this is going to be tremendously difficult. That is going to put pain on smallholders who have been operating for years in this system that has propped them up. And so the report warns we need to make these changes. However, we also need to be sure that we're supporting the people that are going to be affected. So, it's one of the things that suggests is cash assistance and making sure that farmers are able to have support as they transition to a different kind of farming. But that's a massive undertaking, 87% of the agricultural subsidies. And that's also a political thing too, right? What leader, particularly in a nation, and there are many in the world where agriculture is one of the largest sectors of their economy, are they really going to upset, that portion of the economy, but also their voting base by taking away, the money that's been supporting them? So I guess that's another way that this sort of can be political at times as well, which I think is something that we can't forget about. And Margot, you again mentioned the link between COP and the Food System Summit. Maria, Helena, how are you thinking from an FAO perspective about really integrating these two moments? The UN loves to hold big conferences and convene people and everything, and obviously a bit of this is challenged this year because of the pandemic. I'm here in New York, but unfortunately the Food System Summit itself is actually taking place virtually, so folks aren't having the opportunity to meet in person. But how are you, from sort of an organizational perspective, thinking about making sure that these two linkages are happening?
Okay, thank you for this question. But before, let me just build on what you said and what Margot said. Indeed, for us to transform our food systems, we really need the appropriate policies and incentives. And I think, as you refer, the kind of, we are promoting some subsidies, they are not contributing to the sustainable production or to keeping our environment sustainable. And this is how the incentives and appropriate policies are important in this, what we are discussing now. Also, the partnerships. We cannot do it alone. The governments cannot do it alone. We need the private sector because they are the ones dealing with the fertilizers, with some of the elements. Maybe we need to discuss and to see how they can be more sustainable. And again, how we need to bring investments. And here, how the investments has to be smart and they can scale up. And those are the important elements that we think we need to bring to these two big events. But let me refer to a third one that we didn't talk much, is the COP15 of biodiversity. Because we are destroying our biodiversity. We are putting so much pressure in 5 or 6 food, and we are depleting them where we have other food, other production that they can be contributing to a healthy diet. And this is also important now that we go to COP15, that we link these 3 agenda. And this is what FAO is doing. Because sometimes when we look at the production of the agriculture, we forget the biodiversity. And the ones dealing with environment, they are not well seen or working in complementarity with the agriculture. How we can really have a cross-sectoral approach. And this is what FAO is taking, linking the Food System Summit and the COP15 and the COP26. How we can have these 3 agenda linked together, how we can have a sustainable production, how we can have a sustainable consumption that doesn't harm the environment, that we can have healthy diets, and we can contribute to decarbonize our economy and reach the 1.5 degrees centigrade. And this is what FAO really brings to the table, the connection, and not having the silos approach. When we work at the country level, how we can put all the ministers together. Because another issue we are talking now with the COVID-19 is One Health. And One Health is also linked to our environment, is also linked to our production. And this is how FAO puts together ministers of agriculture, ministers of environment, ministers of health, ministers of finance, in a way that we can really have an integrated approach. And this is what, if I say the 3 agenda, the sustainable development agenda, the financial agenda, and the climate agenda, they are all together as one.
Thanks for bringing in the One Health perspective there as well, and I think that does remind us, as if any of us need reminding of the influence COVID-19, of course, has had on all of this, and really what a stark example that is of the stress that we are putting on the planet and its resources. And obviously, a lot still unknown about exactly how that virus came to be, but it shows us that we are all very interconnected and we are using too many resources on the planet right now and putting too much stress. And the One Health approach really tries to focus on this integrated solution to ensuring, health for people and for planet all at the same time. And the COP process, I think, is also could be an opportunity for real movement forward on this food systems piece. Actually, another new report, it is report season. I feel like everyone's been putting out their reports in the last week or two. But from CGIR that just came out yesterday, makes a point that the revision of the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs that are made at COP, it calls it a unique opportunity to set targets and initiatives that also reduce the impact of unsustainable food systems on global climate, while at the same time helping agricultural and food sectors become more resilient to the impacts of climate change. Margot, what kind of opportunity do you see there? And are there any sort of really concrete things that can be happening at COP when, whether it's NDCs or any other commitments or sort of conversations that are happening at that event that can help move this food systems transformation forward?
Thank you for that. And I really appreciate the comments of both yourself and Helena about the opportunity to link biodiversity together here with climate change and food resilience and at the international connection level. And I think the opportunity at COP that is near and dear to my heart in justice work is the idea of scaling up finance for achieving justice in vulnerable areas and in vulnerable peoples, such as women who, for the most part, are very vulnerable and often are working in the rural areas and are farming in these areas and working in that way. So some of the scaling up that Maria was talking about of climate finance for achieving US $100 billion, if we could actually do that, like this is our opportunity to do real climate risk reduction. There's some really interesting insurance programs that are insure resilience that are being discussed, risk-informed early action partnership, and a blueprint for digital climate-informed advisory services. So digitization and some of these technologies, I think, are so important to leverage if we're really going to achieve transformation.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point to think about both the financing piece that you brought up, but also, the justice piece about how this is actually affecting people in their lives and, the people that we rely on to feed the world and how they are being treated in all of this. And I think we've got just a couple of moments left, but I think that brings us back around nicely to the smallholder, which we were discussing at the beginning of this conversation, and how they truly do hold up the global food system. And that's the population, obviously, that FAO works with quite intensely. And so in our last couple moments, Maria, Helena, could you talk a little bit about how, when looking at this transformation, you are focusing on smallholders specifically and the support that you're providing them to ensure that they can make this transition in a sustainable way, not only for the planet, but for themselves, their families, economically, and ensuring that it is not a disruption to their livelihood?
Yes, as I also refer, the smallholder farmers, they are the most impacted. They produce the food we eat, but sometimes they are the ones food insecure because they are not resilient to the effects of climate change, and they don't have access to technology, we talk about science, we talk about technologies, we talk about solutions. They are the ones who are not in the landscape where they can access to all of these incentives we are talking about. And what we do in FAO is to link them, the smallholder farmers, to the solutions, how they can better produce, that they can better use the land, the water, how they can be accessing what we refer, and to me is an important piece, to the financial resources. Because they are the ones, they don't have, they cannot give guarantees. They don't have insurance schemes. And if we have a year where we have El Nino, El Niña, they don't produce and they will lose whatever they have. And how we can bring them and help them to be more resilient. That if they don't have good rain, they have seeds that they can produce. How they can move from one culture to another. And this is really what FAO does to these smallholder farmers. And once we give them voice to bring the solutions, because they are marginalized. Margot talked about women, we talk about the youth. How we can bring the women, the youth to the table of the decision and to help them to be bringing their solution and their voice, and to see this is the solution we want, and this is the way we want to do in order to produce, to eat, and to have a benefit. Because they have to have also benefit, otherwise why are they there and are they producing? And another thing we do is to link the smallholders to the big producers and linking them to the market and how they can and they should produce to the market. And I believe this is what FAO is doing. We have several projects ongoing that we support the smallholder farmers, our hand-in-hand initiative, our innovation forum. We have 1,000 village. FAO is promoting one country, one product. We work with the seeds. We didn't refer to the seeds, the small island development states, but they are one of the most vulnerable group to the climate change. And this is just to give you in a nutshell what really FAO is doing, and to promote innovation, sustainability, to be part of this transformation moment of our agri-food system.
Thanks so much, Maria Helena, for that. And this conversation obviously is going to be one that remains ongoing. It's something we at Devex will be continuing to focus on very heavily. So I look forward to speaking with you both again. Thanks so much for being here today. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you, Margot. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank you, Maria Helena.
It was a pleasure to be part of this platform.